and welcome back to day 9 of my Survivor 46 and 46 marathon. Survivor Vanuatu just wrapped up about 5 minutes ago. Chris, swore up and down. They had to bleep out most of it. Jeff was very bitchy. The reunion's currently going on, and Jeff is still being very bitchy. And we're going to get to all of that in a second. Today we're joined by Topher, host of Kaleidoscope, one of my favorite orgs that I've ever played, and Julia back from when we did Survivor Africa. So Topher, we'll start with you because this is your first time. When you first watched Survivor Vanuatu, because this is going to be like the running thing tonight. Vanuatu is the most underrated season, in my opinion, and I feel like a lot of people are starting to come on to that. What were your thoughts?
Well, my first initial thoughts was they finally casted a guy named Chris. Topher is short for Christopher. They finally casted a guy named Chris, and he cannot get across the balance beam, and he is about to be the first person voted out of the show. And then, lo and behold, he would go from not being able to get across the balance beam, which may be a conspiracy, to then winning the season by pulling out the most underdog come-from-behind victory, I think, of any series imaginable. I think it was very unplausible, unpredictable. When I watched it live, I had gone on a cruise. The Leanne episode aired, I believe, during Thanksgiving of 2004. And I was on a cruise and wasn't able to watch the episode because this was back in the day when you didn't have the ability to do so. And I just assumed it was going to be Chris that was going, and watched the previous Leons and saw that it was Leanne and was just completely thrown off for the rest of the series and was super excited. Now, in hindsight, as I have grown older to watching it, I have come to thoroughly appreciate the gameplay that Chris has put in. I think he one of the more he does not get his flowers enough as a winner. And even though this season lacks a lot in the beginning because they threw in 18 players without really giving a lot of players any airtime and personality whatsoever, to then the second half of the season being filled with nothing but personality and a lot of vengeful bitterness, which is rare.
Boy, we'll get to that.
That is my initial thoughts.
Julia, you were one of the first people when I did 42 and 42. You were one of the people that were like, Coach, Vanuatu is underrated, this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay, yeah, it's Vanuatu. Up until 2 years ago, Vanuatu was in my 30s rank wise. It just wasn't. It was just a season that was there. I didn't hate it or anything, but it was fine. And even Chris, I always just saw as a person of circumstance. My thoughts have changed, but like I said, Julia, you were the one that. So what? Because you were one of the people that basically you're a Vanuatu hipster. What about Vanuatu from when you first watched was okay? No, this is just a good season. Period. I don't need time to tell me that it's changed.
Yeah, I liked Vanuatu before it was cool. Everyone hopped on the bandwagon after. I liked it before it was cool. But before I get going, I want to let you know that you're not going to be getting my vote tonight.
Okay.
But I still really hope that after the podcast,
we can be friends.
Anyway, I watch Survivor, and I said the same thing during Africa. I love the strategy. I love the manipulation, the social aspect. But what I tend to notice in the seasons of Survivor that stick with me a lot are the characters. And I think Vanuatu has some great characters, some all-time characters. Rory, one of my favorite.
Rory. Oh, we'll go down the Rory path.
One of my favorite characters of all time. The icon that he is. I think there's so much to love. And although my hot take is I think Chris gets a little bit too much credit for the game he plays, I think overall that it's a good season. a lot more fluid than I think people remember it for, and then just a great, great character study.
No, this is of the first 9 seasons. This is the most fluid a season has been. I would say outside of maybe Amazon. Like this I would say that this is the most, and it's the most fluid that we're going to get until maybe Gabon. Like like I feel like there's a long gap where I understand people don't like Pagongings, and like none of these seasons that we're ready to go into are straight up Pagongings, except for Palau is not a Pagonging. So none of these seasons that we're ready to go into are straight up Pagongings, but like they're still like steamrolls. A lot of these seasons are steamrolls leading into Gabon, where it's just all over the place because most of those people just are cartoon characters. But we'll get there next week. I think that this season was a lot more fluid, and I think we're gonna go to the beginning of the season. And I said this when I did Amazon. Amazon is my favorite, first or second favorite, depending on the day, favorite men's versus women's season, and it's between this and that and Vanuatu. And this time around, I would say that I probably have Vanuatu as my favorite men's versus women's season because there's the overarching, yes, there are men and women, but like at the main point of it is, okay, there's this women's alliance that actually plans on sticking together, unlike in Amazon. These people plan on sticking together despite the fact that they all hate each other. And there's this one person who picks up on it the first episode. His first confessional is saying, oh yeah, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but basically pointing out why it's easier to go with men than with women and blah, blah, blah. And when he puts himself in the situation where it's him and the women, at that point, I mean, once again, it's having the benefit of hindsight. It's very easy to see how he does it. And I will say that every online game that I've ever played in, I'm either trying to emulate Earl Cole or Chris, because both of those two, like, I feel like they played the best winning games among newbies that actually, we'll get to here, but Chris was not playing with the One World cast, and Chris was not playing with the Borneo cast. The Borneo cast didn't know how to play because the game had never happened before. The One World cast was basically just Kim and Troyzan, and then a bunch of people that didn't know what Survivor was. I think because Chris was out there with people that knew what the game was and was still able to pinpoint, hey, I can lose this challenge and it not mean anything because I have my people. I'm not going to get voted out first because I have my folks. Go ahead. No.
Again, like I said, I think he gets a little bit too much credit for that because you're watching. Yeah, I'm going. You're watching it. It's not even that originally comes up really with the idea of doing this whole flip. He's resigned to voting out Eliza and calling it a day. He gets way too much credit in that move there, which was pivotal to changing the game in his benefit, which it worked out better for him than it did anyone else, but still gets way too much credit for that. And he was the one who put himself in that situation to be down in the numbers anyway, when he could have come in and had a much easier path.
I disagree, but I will let Topher go. Topher.
I feel like he just understood that Twyla was money motivated. Twyla was more about doing what was best for her than she was about playing for these women. And so for him to kind of have the ability to have the foresight to suss out, like, okay, I can outmaneuver myself into a position. He sort of onioned before onioning was a thing. So he had this ability to, okay, he gets they called them the like Flab 5 at the time or whatever, where it was like with all of the older men with no personalities that keep voting out all the younger hot guys, as John Kerry would say. He then sees somebody in Twyla who he ends up latching onto, and he knows he has the Twyla and the Scout of it all, and then has that bond with Eliza and Julia, and I think he chose the better pair. I think he loses in the end to either Eliza or Julia, and he knew that. He knew that that was going to happen. And he kept feeding fuel to that fire of Twyla from things that I've heard after the show of like, Chris has told Twyla, like, yeah, keep that up, egging on Twyla's personality faults.
That's absolutely true, and something that he consciously did, like going into FTC. But I'm talking about like, he says it's so much easier to manipulate the men, but then puts himself into this situation where he's down in those numbers and basically puts it to chance of like, oh, I guess I'm going home. And then he's like, oh my God, they're not going to vote me out.
And it's this comment, because when I said earlier, oh yeah, whenever I play orgs, I try to emulate one or the other. With Chris, both of you have played in games with me, and I've always said, going into a swap, I would rather get swapped in the worst minority situation possible, because at that point, I trust Survivor fans, and what Survivor fans are going to try to do is try to make crazy moves and flip on each other because they feel obligated to do so. And in Chris's situation, it's like, I trust that these women are going to try to do something crazy because they don't like each other. So all I have to do is just put myself in a situation where, okay, I'm going to vote out Sarge, and I'm going to make up this lie and say, oh yeah, Sarge told me to do it, but like, you know, I didn't want to, but I understood, knowing full well that's going to make him look more appealing. He has a confession where he says, yeah, you play to their heart. They're going to keep you along long enough. And so then Chad goes, and once again, all he has to do is vote Eliza and say, hey, they told me to do it. And now you're in a situation where you are the last person left, and like everything is telling you, everything that episode is the family visit episode, Chris is going home because that's the way that it has to go, because we've been trained for 8 seasons to know that an alliance is just going to steamroll their way and then turn on each other. And Chris put himself in the worst possible situation, knowing full well this is the perfect time for people to start turning on each other. And I feel like he kind of waited until Twyla and Scout came to him and said, hey, you know what? Why don't we do this instead? And he's like, yeah, sure, yeah. And they're like, and then immediately he's like, I can get Eliza. And he does. He says, go straight to Eliza, and he says, hey, they're trying to screw you here. And I have had this conversation with people in games. It was so funny watching it this time around. It's like, I don't know how I can convince you that I am not lying to you, but we need to go this way because they are going to go after you. And then they do. And then from there, now you have Scout and Twyla on your side. You have Eliza on your side because, you know, you just saved her ass. You've got Julie because you and Julie have this brother-sister thing. My God. And the only person that is going to be pissed off at you is Amy, but Amy's going to be more pissed off at everybody else for flipping on the women's alliance. And I think that's like, I tweeted this out earlier. It's like this merge tribe, you could build a villains tribe just based off of this merge tribe, because there are really no heroes in this season. I would say the closest one would probably be like Chad. And I actually really like Chad this time around. But for the most part, everyone just hates each other, and everyone's doing everything out of spite. And Chris is, you know, top villain because he's just sitting there letting it happen. He's sitting in the hammock. He's letting Twyla. The way that scene is shot is so funny because he's talking to Eliza, and from his viewpoint, Twyla is definitely watching them talk. The camera pans to Twyla, but like from where Chris is laying, he can very much clearly see Twyla. You know, it's shot so that it's a surprise, but I'm sorry, that was a bit of a rant there, but I said this during Amazon, and I want to get, Topher, I'll get your opinion first. I feel like Richard Hatch, Rob Sesternino, and Chris are the 3 people among the first 10 seasons of this show that really understood what the game was about, like what you needed to do to get to the end. Would you agree with that statement, or do you feel like there are other people in that first 10 seasons? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that Chris came in, and I think that Chris understood the assignment. Now, I do think that Chris benefits from having players that, such as Amy, who, if Amy could have toned down the arrogance just a little bit, I think Amy could have been a little bit more personable and not pushed people away to Chris. And I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I do think that there was a lot of like things that Amy did that turned people off. But regarding to your statement, yeah, Chris definitely came in, understood the assignment, and was there to play the game and to play these people, and was on a quote. You left out Brian. He was on a business trip too. I think
Brian was on a business trip. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that that's where these first 10 seasons, people that came in knowing I'm here to play a game, everybody else is here to be on TV. That was the method to success.
Yeah.
Julia?
And I have one more to add to that. My most underrated strategist of all time. I think he delivered a line that completely encapsulates the heart of Survivor as we know it. And this is a game for $1 million. If you don't take every opportunity given to you, you're a fool. And that's Johnny Fairplay.
Yep.
Came in, understood the strategy, came in with a plan, knew what he wanted to do, did it with flair and pizzazz, but understood the game and understood people in the game.
No, I won't disagree with that. I think because for me, this time around, the fact that I can pinpoint, okay, Rich could do it because of this, Sesternino could do it because of this, and Chris could do it with it. Fair play. I gave a lot of praise to 2 days ago as like a very underrated strategist because everyone remembers the dead grandma thing and kind of just leaves it at that. But like Fair Play was a very good strategist. Chris, like just from the very first episode, he is saying, hey, I'm fine. I don't have to worry about this. I'm not worried. I'm not worried because I trust this. And I
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was so confused. But to the question, yes, this Vanuatu for me ranks higher than the Amazon. For me, I feel like the cast from not top to bottom, from top to Rory, are iconic in different ways. I feel like the gameplay is more fluid. It's not just Rob going back and forth. I feel like there's a lot of people this season that are, trying to find. Twyla is. Someone asked me this yesterday. Is Rob one of the best? Rob Mariano one of the best second placers ever? And I said yes. And I think Twyla is also on that list because Twyla was doing a lot this season. Scout is underrated because Scout is the one that's coming up with half of these Scout Twyla plans. Just overall, the gameplay, specifically on the women's side of things, to the point where other people have come out and said that it was actually Leanne that was in charge of the women, and that Amy got the edit as the winner or the leader of it. They're interviewing Brooke right now during the. Forgot Brooke existed. Yeah, exactly.
Coach.
Yeah. I just Vanuatu was just a lot more fun to just watch the last 2 times I've done it, and I don't hate Amazon. Amazon is one of my favorites, but Vanuatu it has, and I think I'm not one of these compelling winner people, but it does have a compelling winner, and it has a compelling final too. Chris starts off his first speech, to start off, is not the best. And I think he read how people were reacting to it, and then he turned on the waterworks. He turned on the apologies, knowing full well I just told Scout, hey, don't put up with their shit, and she didn't. And I support her not putting up with their shit because those people were pissed off, and we will get to that. Well, Julia, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I do. I want to say a lot of things. I'm very opinionated. Quick touching on this question. I think Amazon is something I love. Amazon is one of my favorites. I think it's something that you love more when you're younger because of the jokes and the sex factor and all of that. But once you watch Survivor a couple times, are looking for more of the story, the compelling characters, the storylines, things like that. That's why on your second, your third watch through, Vanuatu shines out just a little bit more, at least in my eyes.
Topher?
I think that Vanuatu ages better because of the archetypes that they went for. I think that Amazon, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, twigs and sticks, you know, they casted the, you know, models, and like they went for, which Vanuatu is guilty of too, but they voted the models out at the beginning of the season because they put them all on the male tribe this year. No, but
there's
like
there's one right there.
Yeah, for Amazon, I think that it was a very much so a different era of battle of the sexes that felt borderline chauvinistic, and I think it does not hold up as well today because it is very clearly edited through a men's lens. Whereas I think that Vanuatu featured a lot more stronger personalities as opposed to your typical female archetypes. And I think that is why Vanuatu, as a character-driven season, holds higher than Amazon. And if it wasn't for Rob Cesternino, who is the king of all strategists for his time, Amazon does not hold up at all.
And I said that the other day. I felt like I was going through the motions when I was watching Amazon. Like, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. It just felt like, okay, yeah, it's the Rob season. It's the Rob season, and once you've gotten to the second or third time of watching that season, the allure comes away because it's like, okay, yeah, it's Rob doing Rob things. With this season, there is a compelling storyline of Chris versus the women and watching the women eat themselves to the point where, okay, yeah, I don't. And he has a confessional where he says, I don't even have to do anything because these people hate each other so much. And I that stood out to me so much more this time around because the last time I did this, I was just getting into playing, these online games or whatever. And then, 2 years later, it's like, yeah, people feel obligated to do crazy stuff when everything is telling them, hey, no matter how much we don't like each other, if we have this plan in place, let's just do it and let the best person win of this group. Because if we screw around and we let this guy more around, he could screw around and get to the end, which he does. And he had that, and he's learning about these people as he goes along. And he knows that Twyla has a short fuse, and he knows that Twyla, hey, don't let these people punk you because the respect thing. And I feel like I have an obligation. I won't say obligation, but Earl and Visepia will always be my two favorite winners. If Chris should be my favorite winner. He's not. He's third, but he's my favorite narrator of all time. Because every time he had a confessional this season, it's like, yep, he's right. Yep, he's right. Yeah, everything he's saying is accurate. Yes, Julia.
And it's accurate, but it's not as overbearing as like Rob Cesternino in the Amazon. Like that is it's the same thing like when you're going to watch Redemption Island, like when you're going to watch Samoa, when it's so heavily one person, the fatigue really hits on those rewatches. But we've talked about so many different characters, so many different strong characters and personalities that he can be this really great orator of the game that we check back in with to like get that, like funny quip to like really see what's happening, but we're still getting a bunch of different perspectives. And again, that's a big reason why it does hold up.
Yeah. And we're going to leave Chris alone for a little bit, but we're going to get back to when we get to the final tribal part of this. But honestly, just every time I've watched this season in particular, since the first time I watched it, it just keeps getting better. I even tweeted it out yesterday, like, oh yeah, Vanuatu got into my top 10 last time I did this. Will end up in my top 5. I still don't think it'll end up in my top 5 this time around. It could, but like it is so good, and it's what it has going for it is so. I'll compare it to like Caramoan. So Caramoan has a very shit pre-merge where most of those people are forgettable, and I couldn't tell you most of their names. I know Shamar, and like there was a Hope somewhere in there, and Francesca, obviously. With this season, I called them the 4 generic white guys, the models as Topher referenced earlier. There's the 4 generic white guys. Dolly was Dolly. Like Dolly was fine, whatever.
As George would say, "Who was Dolly?"
Who's Dolly? I think Lisa was in there. Bubba, like it. Yeah, the pre-merge is not. They're not all timers. Ironically, and this is just a weird flex. Me and Topher played the game recently where we had to find basically an obscure Survivor player and let another tribe try to guess who it was. And one of our Survivor players was Mia from this season. So fun facts. But the pre-merge is it's not the best. But you start seeing like everything being built. Like they build to the climax, and I think the climax is when Chris votes for Sarge because of the way they film it, where it's like, hey, I'm doing this, for us, and it shows Sarge, and it's like, okay, cool. Like I get that. I understand trying to vote with the majority to save your ass next time. Let's go back a little bit. How do we like the pre-merge? How do we like the pre-merge?
I like what happened in the pre-merge, strategy-wise. Obviously, this is still only their second time doing 18 people, and this is their first time doing 18 new people. So
they're quits.
Well, 18 new people. So still trying to find that balance with the editing. It's still something that like Survivor struggles with for years and years and years to come. But obviously you don't get a lot of those pre-merge characters highlighted as would like. But the strategy that's happening and the talks that are happening, even between like these pre-merge characters, like people are playing. People came to play, whether they went out first or they went out second to last. Like everyone came to play, and it was a very fluid pre-merge, one of the most fluid pre-merges up to this point, I would say.
I agree. I think I agree. I feel that, so like with the premiere, does it not feel like, and I've never heard one way or the other, but does it not felt like they filmed it thinking that they had a 2-hour premiere or a 90-minute premiere? Because they spent a lot of time on the marooning and the whole like climbing to get the coconut and all of that stuff, just to immediately have to go to a challenge and then to tribal council. So like we really at the beginning did not get to know anybody except for Chris because he couldn't get across the balance beam. And then we rush right into a double.
No. I'm supporting the comment. People talking.
And then rush right into a double where like, yeah, if it wasn't for Mia getting loud and having a fight, we probably would have no idea who Mia is. The women's was interesting because we got a split vote right away. And I think that that's something that is not typical. You don't get like a 5-4 vote at the beginning of a season has there been a first vote so far that has been that divided of
split?
All
no, Borneo no, Australia no, Africa no, Marquesas no.
I mean, Marquesas not completely divided, but it's split.
It's split.
It's not this. It's not this.
This is both.
There are clear sides.
Yeah,
there are clear sides here.
Yeah. Both tribes have clear split vote situations that take place, and then we go into a double. And so, because that energy is wasted on a double, we don't get to know the who, what, where, when, whys of those splits. And then we have the most. We have that middle episode, which is always so weird to me, where Brady I don't know. It's just a weird middle episode. We should have just gone into the swap. But we have the most convoluted swap I think we have ever had or will have in Survivor history, to the point where they just said, screw it, we're going random from now on. It just so much extra stuff took so much extra time that we didn't get to know really any of the characters that were voted out pre-merge. And I think it was because they didn't have anything fun to offer. And they also didn't have, like, there was bigger stories to tell, and they saved it for the payoff.
For later, yeah. Eliza doesn't get much screen time pre-merge. And I realized that during, I think, one of the swap episodes, and they show Eliza during a challenge. I'm like, wow, I haven't seen her in a bit. which is weird because in my head, Eliza is a main character this season. I agree. I do agree with you. The pre-merge did feel kind of just there. But like I said earlier, I feel like you said, I feel like they're trying to build to that next step, and we see that a lot with a lot of seasons moving forward, where I won't say they neglect the pre-merge, but it's like, okay, no, we have to start getting ready for what's actually going to happen. Mm-hmm. So let's neglect some of these people, right now. I keep referring to the 4 generic white guys on the men's tribe, because even though I know their names today, if you were to ask me their names in 5 days, I won't be able to tell you because I don't remember. Julia.
That's a problem for, like I said, a bunch of seasons to come. I'll be back in a couple days to do Guatemala. I consider myself a survivalist. I consider myself someone who knows a lot. If you ask me, Julia, you're doing this podcast in a couple days, can you name me the first 3 or 4 boots of Guatemala? Say,
there's old white guy. There's old white guy.
An old Jim.
And
that's it.
Jim. Yeah. That's because he's first boot. You're not going to know the brunette that gets voted out third.
I don't. That's what I'm saying.
The person that tells Judd he has ADD, yeah. I don't remember her name.
Margaret, you have ADD. There's a book in there. Same thing with Palau. I can't name half of these bitches.
Generic white guy that doesn't get picked on a tribe. I don't remember him.
Jonathan, come on.
Sure. I'm sure his name is Jonathan. We'll find out in a little bit. Don't remember.
Brian, we're not going to not thank Jesus.
Yeah. The question. Okay. So I thought Eliza was so hypocritical. Eliza changed her mind and voted for Dolly, but Eliza got mad when Lisa switched her vote to Mia. This season falls into the All-Stars trap, I guess, of people being hypocritical. But the reason I put this one so much higher is because All-Stars, they went to the game thinking that they were friends. I mean, they were friends, but they went to the game planning to play Friend Viber, and realized that Rob and other folks were not playing Friend Viber, and were pissed off at that. Here, I think these people just were just regular game annoyed when bad things would happen to them, even though they were hypocrites because they would do the exact same thing. And I think Twyla brings that up. Twyla or Chris bring it up during Final Tribal, where it's you all are doing the exact same thing. You're just pissed off that we did it and we're sitting here. And I get that. We as super fans, we get that. We understand that, people can preach this honor and integrity thing till the cows come home, whatever, but everyone is out there wheeling and dealing. Everyone out there is lying at some point or another. No one can actually sit there and say, "Oh, I've never lied," because that's not true. You can't sit there and say that it's not and actually believe it. Eliza says that at Final 4. When Twyla catches her and Chris talking, she's like, "I haven't lied once." It's that's
a lie.
Even though we're not being shown everything, that can't be true. You can't make it that far without lying at least at some point. So to answer that question. I don't know. Where's the question in that? Eliza's hypocritical in that situation. Yeah, but I don't just because I'm calling her a hypocrite does not mean that I'm talking down on her. It just means that she was a hypocrite in the situation. But everyone's a hypocrite when they play this game because everyone sits on their high horse if they get voted out before the people that did it better get voted out. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the name of the game.
It was like a caddy. When you're watching All Stars. It gets gross, it gets personal, and it gets gross and personal here, but you feel like you're watching Mean Girls, not a personal tragedy. You're seeing these people argue and you're like, oh, this is so high school, calling her a deceptive lying bitch, and you're laughing at it. You're not cringing like you are when going off on Boston Rob in the
Was Brianna the circus? Don't remember. I don't remember this person.
So Brianna was the brunette. I told you that she was voted out third.
But no, yeah, but there was a circus performer that season, right? Or like something like that, or like a mime or a magician or something like.
We'll figure out.
We'll figure it out in a couple days.
So, I think there's something to the fact, though, that it's a sanctimoniousness, right? Like Chris falls into sort of like, not to cross over with Big Brother, but like that Dr. Will category of where like it's like I am playing the game and I'm gonna bullshit you and I'm gonna lie, and I feel like he's open sort of about that, not directly, but sort of indirectly in just his generic demeanor and personality, right? You're like, you know it, like Scout calls it out of like, you're in bullshit up to your ears. We just all know you're bullshitting, but because you know they're bullshitting, it's like you feel you have that manipulation and control over them because you see them, right? Whereas with Twyla, it's I'm swearing on my son. I'm an honorable woman. I only go out there and do the honorable thing, and I don't lie, and I tell it like it is, and I'm going to tell you off, which means I can't lie. And so people see that, and it's like, okay, I know he was going to bullshit me, and he did. I trusted she wasn't going to bullshit me, and she did. And that's where I think that kind of like comes into play. It like us as well, maybe not the two of you, but like I know how much people not seeing you as a bullshitter, even though you are, can affect you. You know, like.
Well, and that's let's talk about Twyla, because especially watching it this time and the last few times I've watched this season, I felt for her so much during Final Tribal. Who would I have voted for? I'm sure someone will bring it up at this point. I probably would have voted for Chris, but I would have felt so horrible for Twyla just because people were so stuck on this whole swearing on her son thing. And I think it's because, I mean, if you listen to the accents of most people from this season, you can see why a lot of people took that personally. I don't care. And she even has a confessional where after she does it, she was like, yeah, and hopefully God forgives me or whatever. But like, no, my son doesn't care. My son won't care and all that. I don't care. Like, that would not have bothered me at all if she had done that and then lied about it. It's like, and the fact that Amy and Eliza and all these people specifically, and not to say that they're less religious than Sarge is, but Sarge has an accent. So I'm assuming that Sarge is more religious than the two of them are. The fact that they were holding that over her head as well as Sarge, I felt horrible for her. Because that's like her main storyline of the Final Tribal is she has to continuously bring that up, and it's continuously brought up. And Sarge sitting there saying, "Oh, you've damned your son's soul to hell forever," and it's like, all right, dude. I feel like you might be taking the shit a little too seriously. Do we feel like? Well, first, I guess we'll just summarize it all. How do we feel about Twyla this season?
I love Twyla. I think Twyla's great. I think she's a great character. It's an absolute shame she never came back. Absolute shame. I think she would have been a great female villain in Heroes versus Villains. I think she was still ahead of her time at the time when it came to strategy. Morgan was a magician's assistant. What do we know?
Who was Morgan?
Circus performer. I knew it was something. She was something.
I think the stuff with Twyla came from like confirmation bias of, like we said, No, thank God.
No. Keep on talking. If I point to a comment, don't pay attention. I'm just pointing to a comment. I agree with you.
It came from like confirmation bias because it's exactly like you said. Everyone knows Chris is going to lie, he's going to cheat, he's going to scheme, he's going to do whatever. That's why it doesn't hurt as much. But when it's the person you never expect that ends up not only being the one to betray you, but like dupe you to make you like for the fool, it goes, okay, now let me look for things that reinforce that idea in my head. And I think that was like the biggest thing to pull from, especially because like obviously Twyla comes from a Midwest, like a lower income, not very well educated, and
she couldn't type. Oh my God, that got me this time. Oh my goodness, I almost cried.
It was cool.
But 2004.
obviously, like,
It's true. It's
with,
true.
with like family is like a really central value to her. So when this person you don't expect lies and cheats and beats you and you're mad about it, you're going to find like something they really care about, something that's like central to their character, and use it to confirm the biases you have in your head. And it sucked. And it was really unfortunate because we saw it happen, like 20 seasons later. And Trish voted for Tony there. So.
But see, I think that's the difference is I wish that Twyla would have owned it a little bit more, because she sat there and she said, no, it wasn't worth it. Right. Like she should have said, yeah, well, one, she was forced to, right? Like they made her like lie on her son in the Bible and all of that stuff. Like what is she supposed to say? Yo, yes, I am planning on voting you off. So let's go ahead and turn around and vote me off. Like, no, like she had no choice. She had to vote to lie on her son's name. And yes, if it meant that she was going to make it to the end, it would have absolutely have been worth it to have lied on her son's name, because she needs $1 million, you know, and that's the bottom line. The money was that important to her. And I think at the time, you know, I think there was a lot more value given to the money that you probably could have pushed that agenda more. But again, you're not knowing, you don't know what the jury is going to present to you. And maybe she did, or maybe she didn't. She probably was very caught off guard with how this ended up being like the one thing. Like Sarge wasn't even there for the lying on the son, was he? He was just like
he wasn't even there.
Right. He was just like
Amy probably went back and said, "Oh yeah, Twyla did this."
Yeah. So like you end up being like, you know, forced into a situation where you're like, this is the thing that everybody's writing on this tribal? Like, what? How do I even dig myself out of this? Because it's the one thing I didn't account for that everybody's calling me out on.
Yeah. And Sarge, like, and that's the thing is, like I said earlier, you know, I was kind of joking when I said, "Oh yeah, Sarge seems more religious than Amy and Eliza because of the accent, whatever." Like Sarge does actually just say, "Oh yeah, my beliefs and blah blah blah. You've damned your son's soul to hell and everything." It's like that bothered me more than any other jury speech this season specifically, because he's still sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, I'm probably going to vote for you anyway." And it's like, okay, if you were that angry and you still say you're going to vote, what exactly did Chris say outside of "I still want to be friends with you" out of the game? Like, if you're putting more stock into Chris saying, "Oh yeah, I would still like to be friends with you" out of the game, then Twyla, you know, and she's apologetic for it, and I do believe her. She continues to say, I'm sorry that I did this. I'm sorry that I swore on this, and I know Julia brought it up earlier. Like Tony says, it was worth it. Many seasons later, Twyla had done this on a season with people with less funky accents. She probably wins because people put so much stock into that one moment, and it's very frustrating. Yes, Sarge destroys Twyla, and it's bothersome. It's so uncomfortable to watch. And I just watched All Stars yesterday, and that shit was very uncomfortable. And watching his speech, and you know, Amy votes for Twyla in the end, so like I'll give her, you know, a pass. Eliza, whatever. Like Eliza's she was what, like 22, 23 at the time. Like she was relatively young.
Yeah.
I can understand why she'd be pissed off at both of them. But I just felt horrible and I guess Jeff felt horrible for her because he shits on Chris the entire reunion and praises Twyla. Twyla is a very underrated player and a very underrated runner-up, because I think her sitting next to a lot of even finalists from these first 9 seasons potentially wins in seasons where she's not, if she plays on the Marquesas one and she sits next to Nalia or Giuseppe, I think she probably wins.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Africa, I think there's a chance that she wins. But we'll leave that alone because we've only talked about the finalists so far, and we're 45 minutes in. I want to talk about the main character of the pre-merge and the first episode of the merge, Rory.
I can't.
Rory, as an adult, there are three people in the season that I relate to the most: Twyla, Chris, and Rory. And when Rory, just everything Rory does, whether I agree with it or not, even when he's talking about how Mia is classless during the one challenge, is like, okay, you're wrong, but like I love you anyway, so it's fine. Rory, very iconic merge boot. I would say of the first 9 seasons, you can only compare him to Boston Rob, Andrew Savage, and maybe Sheehan as far as merge boots. What are her thoughts on Rory?
I love when Rory sits down and says, I refuse to lift another finger around this camp if y'all are just going to vote me out. And I think it worked. They voted out Lisa Kiefer. So I don't know if that causation is necessarily correlation, or correlation is necessarily causation. But yeah, I to me, it's iconic. Everything Rory does, he's just so unabashedly himself, and you have to love a man for that.
He's incredible. He is incredible. So funny. He's so funny. Again, would Rory have played well on a second time? Absolutely not. Rory is not a good Survivor player. But God, you could put Rory on my screen as many times as you want, and I would be happy. I'd be happy.
Yeah, that's why I said the merge tribe. Not even the merge tribe of this season. You could turn into a villains tribe, and I would watch every episode of it because they are just every single one of them. Okay, let's remove Chad because I would say Chad's probably not a villain in this group, and we'll even take Scout out. So you got 8 people who are in some aspect a villain, a Survivor villain. And I feel like Rory is the one that's just like the character. Rory is the character of the season of, oh yeah, let's just put him on camera, let's just let him talk, and let's just see what he says. And him saying, oh yeah, I will burn this camp to the ground, and only for them to get their family letters and say, oh, my wife talked me out of this. It's like, wow. Thank God that happened. I don't know what you would have done in that situation.
You would have gone full Butch. You would have gone full Butch up in there.
Yeah, Rory is so great and he's someone that doesn't outstay his welcome. And there's a lot of merge boots in these first 10 seasons that don't outstay their welcome. And I think that Rory is up there with the Andrew Savage and the Boston Robs of it. If we had Rory moving forward, I feel like it would have gotten more messy. I feel like it would have gotten All-Stars messy. And All-Stars messy is not fun. Vanuatu messy is a very fun ride until Final Tribal, where there's a lot of tears. And even Jeff says, oh, yeah, it's been a very emotional night. It's like, yeah, it fucking has. But if we had Rory continue throughout the merge, I don't see the merge going very well. And we're going to get to that later on, but I wouldn't have hated seeing Rory play in a returnee season between 9 and 21. I think that would have been fun. I don't think that his game would have changed, like you said, but he was a fun character in this season. Everything that deals with Vanuatu is underrated. Very underrated character in Rory, very underrated winner in Chris, very underrated season in Vanuatu, underrated runner-up and Twyla. The Women's Alliance. We're going to get... Oh, no, go ahead.
I did want to say about Rory. Most robbed pre-juror, not in the sense that he is the robbed pre-juror, but we are robbed from Rory on the jury.
Rory content.
Swap Chad and Rory. That's how that should have been, because Rory would have given us content.
I couldn't imagine Rory face on the jury. Like we get our first introduction to Eliza face on the jury this season. Rory face would have been chef's kiss. The Women's Alliance. Now we're gonna get semblances of women's alliances, moving, ultimately reaching its peak, I guess, in Micronesia. I feel like the answer is there, but like, why doesn't it work here? Why do you think they could not just get through one more vote, even though they hate each other? Why do you think they couldn't just get through one vote and just say, hey, you know what? I understand we all hate each other, but let's just do this and hate each other and vote each other out afterwards.
I think it just came down to arrogance. I think a really great comparison for Amy is female Lex. They have a lot of the same qualities. They do. When it comes to how they play, how out in front they like to be, but also how they manage their relationships. Very clear with Lex. Who Lex is with, who is his core, who Lex really doesn't like a lot. He wears it on his sleeve because he feels comfortable, because he's in charge, because he's out in front. You see a lot of the same things with Amy, to where Amy thought she didn't have to worry about managing all of those relationships, managing this alliance, where when you're on top, you need to work harder than anyone else in the game to make sure you stay there. And I think that was why it all fell apart. I think if Amy had done, and with that, I know there's Leanne truthers out there, but Leanne did a bit more work with.
Well, also Amy was immune during that.
But if Amy and Leanne had done a better job of creating better sub-alliances, making sure that the people on the bottom felt more comfortable, that they could have gotten to a situation where they are the final six, and we more than likely have an Amy or a Leanne winner.
I think that it was very, there's subtleties that I don't think that get, necessarily confessionals about or anything like that, but they still show it. And Leanne sitting down at the challenge and saying, that's okay, I didn't need it anyway. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very obvious, like, why is she so comfortable? And, the evidence of that was in the pre-merge, with Twyla being able to observe, how the women fawn over Amy, and Amy's ability to conduct and manipulate without making Twyla feel comfortable. Maybe Twyla would have had a better shot had Twyla stuck with Nullified, and they didn't take out, Rory and Sarge and, Chad right away, because maybe there's different rooms to make things move throughout, but yeah, I think Amy making it very obvious that Twyla was on the bottom, and isolating Eliza in a lot of ways. I think not paying enough attention to her relationship with Eliza, because Eliza was really the pivotal one in that vote.
I'm glad you brought up Lepevi because I watched it today. I realized my knowledge of tribal names, like I can name random tribes past 8, but my knowledge of, like, I know all the tribe names, merge and whatever, ends at season 8. Because here, when they announce both tribe names, I'm like, okay, no, they're still just men and women. Like, I don't, like, you saying Lepevi was like, oh yeah, Lepevi, yeah, there were tribe names here. And, like, unless you're, like, an iconic tribe, or, like Oolong in our next season, or,
Matt Singh.
Or Matt Singh, yeah, or Fong, or whatever. I just kind of stopped paying attention to tribe names after All Stars. That has nothing to do with anything that you just said. But yeah, go ahead.
It's the self-referential. They very distinctly say Yasser and Lepet, like the people of the tribes very specifically refer to those tribes on the regular. And I think that helps. You've got, Rory over there being like, oh, Yasser this and Yasser that, and on the Yasser tribe. And then you've got Rory on the Lepevi tribe at the one shot. Lepevi. Yeah, that's really the only, thanks to Rory. If it wasn't for Rory,
it all comes back to Rory.
I always thought it was kind of ironic that like you have the men versus women and the women's tribe name is Yes Sir.
Oh, well, open your third eye. Are there any other characters or players this season that we want to talk about before we start wrapping up?
Bubba's faux pas that I think has played dividends into future seasons of think about the murder.
Jeff Varner. He pulled the Jeff Varner.
I think that it really goes to what would tribal lines have played a factor had they lost anyway? You probably, but like the fact that he just gave them the ammo that they needed by being like, think about the merge.
Yeah.
Jeff
Varner in Cambodia, by the way, for everyone listening. I'm talking about Cambodia, not Game Changers. I agree, but Bubba was he really screwed the pooch there. And I would say that I tweeted this one out earlier when Dolly basically had her Christy from Amazon moment of, oh yeah, I'm in the middle. It's like, shut the fuck up, because if you keep saying that, they're just gonna vote you out. And they got her because she couldn't commit to something. Thankfully, it was pre-merge and not right before the end of the game. But Julia,
oh yeah, I was just green. Ooh, Vanuatu.
No other characters for you, Julia?
Yeah, I was gonna say no other characters for you.
I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of the big ones. I like Bubba; he was funny, but you said I mentioned earlier, pre-merge characters just weren't great. They were just vehicles to propel the main character story along. And in most seasons, I really wouldn't like that. Honestly, I don't mind it as much this season because I think the main characters were all so rich and developed and compelling that I was fine with a little bit of the balance in the editing.
So the big question here, before we get to our two questions that we also end these off of, why is Vanuatu not looked highly on, in y'all's opinion? Because I feel like anyone that just gives it one rewatch immediately changes their mind. So why do you think that Vanuatu is historically looked at as a lesser season?
I feel like a lot of it comes down to timing issues. Like historically, usually this season after a really big returnee season, a really big season is not perceived very well at the beginning. Nicaragua, for one. Gabon wasn't seen, even though that wasn't a full return. Like Gabon wasn't seen highly. No one really liked Survivor 41. I know the Survivor 41 truthers are going to come out now, but after you get like a big landmark season like All Stars, with how excited people were about it, and then kind of what it turned out to be, I think coming right into that, Vanuatu wasn't what people wanted to be the separation from All Stars. It was good, but it wasn't something that would draw them back in from it. Yeah. But now that it's more like super fans watching, people going back and revisiting, and don't have that full lens of coming right out of All Stars and all of the things surrounding it, it makes it a much more compelling watch.
I think had the game been as appreciated as it is today, I think that Vanuatu would have immediately have been favored higher. I think it falls victim to the fact that, yes, it is a season with a lot of villains in it, and I think that translates to a lot of dislikable characters. I also think the show did not do enough to push a new start, if you will. Like, this is the season that's right after All-Stars, and like, yeah, you're going to have nothing but new players, so you need to do something that's new, and nothing about it was really new. We just did men versus women like 2 years prior with Amazon, and it, like, yes, it was a great season, but I think it just shows like, oh, we don't know how to divide 18 people, and we don't want to do season three tribes of 6 again. Now Survivor's fallen into the pitfall of we only know how to divide 18 people into 3 seasons or 3 tribes. But yeah, like I really think that's where it's like there was a lot of gimmickiness to it, as far as like they added so much game mechanic with the opening, with the way even the merge was convoluted. The merge episode gets cut short because there's a reward challenge in the middle of it, and then they merge halfway through, immediately go into a challenge, and then immediately go to tribal. Like, there's no game talk that episode, and that should be a pivotal episode. So I think they did lose a lot of luster to just letting the season breathe. Now, I think because people's vision of history and the way that word of mouth kind of projected it, if I'm going to recommend to somebody new, hey, I've got 5 seasons for you to watch, I want them to be all newbie seasons, Vanuatu is not up there in those seasons. And so then it falls victim to, it's something people watch later, and you have to be a hardcore fan to even want to investigate it.
Yeah. I brought this up. I don't even know if it was before we went live or not, but like the revisionist history part of it, I feel like people shit on this season because a lot of things you guys have brought up. And I almost relate it to, as a big MCU fan, All-Stars is not Endgame by any means. Endgame is cool. All-Stars is not. But I feel like there's a survivor fatigue aspect that happens after All-Stars, where it's like, okay, yeah, now we've got Vanuatu, but like, these aren't people that we know. And I feel like that's the problem one of the problems the New Age has run into is, oh, we had Winners at War before COVID happened. Now we don't know any of these people, and we really want a returnee season, so we don't care about any of this until we get to a returnee season. When in reality, like, you have to build up to these next seasons. And I think that's why I talk so much about All-Stars leading into actual All-Stars this time around. Because as much as I hate All-Stars, watching the first 7 seasons going into it, like I had to bring up All-Stars because a lot of these people are going to have this moment where they all come together here. And now we're on the Micronesia trajectory of, okay, we're gonna get Amy back, and we're gonna get Eliza back, and we're getting 2.0s of 2 characters that are very big in this season, and one of them is very big in their season coming up in a few days. I think that there was a lot of survivor fatigue at that point. I think that All-Stars probably rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I do feel like, the fact that it was at face value, there's no Boston Robs on this season. There are no Johnny Fairplays or Ruperts on this season. People that like casuals would know. There's nobody on this season that casuals would know, and I think that's go back and listen to this. We all agree with you. Chris is a top tier winner, but I think that's why people have continued to discredit everything that happens this season, because like I said at the beginning of this, it came into my top 10 when I did 42 and 42. I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5 this time around as well as what I gave it last time, and it could end up in my top 5 when I'm all said and done with this one, July 10th, because it does have a very merge to end, and that final tribal where I feel like I can put that on in front of just randos and say, hey, pick a winner from these two, because I do feel like both of them did what they had to do in that moment to win. Chris is the bullshit artist who bullshits his way through all of it, and thankfully Scout calls him out at the end. And then there's Twyla, who is herself And in the moment, this is like the third day in a row I've mentioned this, but it's the Mike Turner thing where it's like Twyla realizes in this moment, man, I really screwed up. Like people don't respect me here. And she's very apologetic about it. And I'm glad that she didn't apologize to Eliza, but apologized to everyone else. Because she actually did feel bad about everyone else. She didn't feel bad about Eliza. Yeah, you have a big mouth and you think you're spoiled. Sorry. But to everyone else, she was apologetic because she actually felt bad about it. I wish more people would give this season a chance. Anytime I see people's rankings and I see the Vanuatu's low, I just assume they've only seen it once.
Mhm.
Because if they've seen it more than once and they still don't like it, they're just crazy. Final thoughts before I get to the actual last two questions. This is officially our longest pod of the first 9 seasons.
Woo!
So
Yes, underrated Vanuatu longest pod.
any final thoughts on the season before we get to my last two questions?
Yes, I think it is a phenomenal season. I do think that there was an earthquake in the middle of the season. Like, excellent location.
Totally
Islands
glanced
of
over.
Fire is a cool theming when they themed based off of locations. So, like, that was really cool. And I'll also say it is so important that if you are, as a Survivor fan, have made the decision that you're just going to watch every season, to then go back and just watch it in order. Because there is a growing process and appreciation that you gain than to just arbitrarily pick season over season, because there's just it's just not, it doesn't work the same.
There is no better way to do it than to be a completionist. You're going to have some bad things in the way, but to see the progression, there's nothing like it. And that's why Coach keeps coming back. He is 40 and whatever, and he'll continue to do them until we're up by like 70 and it takes up half of his year. But no, I love Vanuatu. Like I said, I love Vanuatu before it was cool. That's all I can say. I'm gonna go eat some chicken wings behind your guys' back. You're not allowed to have any. I'll give you the bones though.
I'll give you the bones.
Classic. Coconut bandits before there were coconut bandits.
Coconut bandits. There were the wing bandits.
I'll give you bones. You deserve it.
So, the last two questions, as I've always done. From this season, we have had 2 people come back. Correct.
Yep.
Correct. Were they the 2 right ones first? And if not, who would you have put in their spot, and who would you have also brought back?
You want to go? You want me to?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yes, they were right. Amy and Eliza both, I think, delivered on their second time and should have been brought back. But I do think that the well should have been dug into more from this season. And I do believe that Chris deserved to play again, whether it be heroes versus villains, whether it have been an all winners. Like, Chris should have gotten a call to come back and to defend his title, because I don't know if he could do it a second time. I think he's an early boot. And I also think that Twyla 100% should have been brought back. I don't know if there's anybody else that really should make the cut for a returnee, especially with a pool that's as deep as it is. But
Rory.
Oh, yes.
Rory.
But yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
I completely agree. I feel like there were 2 obvious picks to bring back. I also agree Twyla, Chris definitely should have gotten the opportunity to play again. I'm going to actually disagree with Topher a bit. I think if Chris had come back, I feel like he would have done well. I think he would have done well because I think he understands the people aspect, and at the core, like, that's the most important thing that's going to translate from like season to season, is understanding people and people dynamics. And going into something like a heroes versus villains, but especially like an all winners, his threat level is lower. No one's really thinking of Chris as this like giant name. and I feel like you would surprise people.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chris for Winners at War, Twilight for Heroes versus Villains, and I'll throw Rory in there
Rory.
for this comment. Yeah, I mean, yeah, fuck it, we'll put him on the from the favorites try for Karamo, and I don't give a shit. He can be there.
Whoever answers the call.
Yeah, this is all right. We got Francesca back, and we got Rory, so we're good. And obviously the last question: if no matter if the person has come back or not, if they were to have people pre-33 on season 50, are there any people that you are dying to see come back from this season for season 50?
Chris.
I think at this point, Chris is a little past his prime of playing Survivor. I still think, although probably not the most realistic given her spot, seeing like a more adult Eliza, more grown, mature Eliza play Survivor would be so incredibly interesting because she's either going to be completely transformed, she's going to be more calm, more rational, like bring a real like strategic side to the game, or she's gonna be exactly the same, and it's gonna be hilarious watching like a 40-year-old woman call people bitches and throw temper tantrums. And either way, I will love every second of it. So that's who I would like.
I agree with that, actually. I think because of how much Eliza has complained about the new era, let her play the new era.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is the same. It would be either Chris or Eliza. Chris because he should have been a Winners at War, but Eliza because, hey, okay, you think that this is so easy. Here you go. Like you have fun doing this, and we'll see if you still think it's easy. Then I would root for her because like Eliza's hot, but like outside of that, I think that Vanuatu did its job. And I feel like Vanuatu is a great jumping off point going into this next phase of Survivor that ends with Micronesia. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I think if you are listening to this at any point and you still haven't watched Vanuatu and you're an hour and 11 minutes in, no matter when you're watching it, please go watch Vanuatu because it's very good. Like I said, I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. I think right now it'd probably be like second of the 9 seasons that I've watched, right behind Pearl Islands. And I don't think it's going to change tomorrow because we're talking about my most overrated season, Survivor Palau. I still like it. Please listen, but I still like it. I think it's overrated, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. Maybe my opinion will change. Topher, thank you so much for joining us today. Julia, thank you. We're going to have you back in a couple of days for Guatemala. And this has been a lot of fun because we didn't even touch on a lot of the stuff that I wanted to. And I think because we felt so gung-ho about a lot of stuff that we did. But thank you both so much. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you everyone in the chat for continuing to support. And we will see you on the other side.